The distress signal came on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Commander Hyun-woo was drinking his third cup of coffee when the communications officer shouted across the bridge of the flagship, "Indomitable." The sound that filled the bridge was unlike anything they had heard before. It was crying, broken, and desperate, transmitted across 15 light-years of empty space. Hyun-woo set down his cup and walked to the main screen. The image was poor, filled with static and corruption from damaged transmission equipment. But he could see her clearly enough. The alien woman had blue-green skin that reminded him of ocean water, with large eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the universe. Her hands were shaking as she spoke. "My name is Ji-won," she said in surprisingly clear English. "I am the last ambassador of the Kelton people. I send this message to anyone who will listen. Please, someone must know we existed. Someone must remember us." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member stopped what they were doing to watch. Ji-won's voice cracked as she continued. She told them about the Vrakon Collective, a massive empire that had appeared in Kelton space 3 months ago. The Vrakon did not ask for treaties or trade. They simply began destroying worlds. "They killed 12 billion of my people," Ji-won said, tears streaming down her face. "They bombed our cities until nothing remained but ash. They took our children for experiments. They hunted the survivors for entertainment. We are a peaceful species. We had no weapons that could stop them. We pleaded for mercy, but they laughed at us." Hyun-woo felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had been in the military for 20 years. He had seen combat, had made hard decisions, had lost friends in the line of duty. But this was different. This was deliberate cruelty on a scale he could barely comprehend. Ji-won's image flickered. "I do not ask you to fight for us. We are already gone. I only ask that you remember. Remember that the Kelton people lived. That we loved. That we created beauty in this universe. Please do not let us disappear, as if we never existed." The transmission ended. The bridge remained silent for a long moment. Then Hyun-woo spoke quietly to his communications officer. "Send that to Earth Command immediately. Mark it Priority 1. Hyun-woo, 2010. Hyun-woo, Hyun-woo." But Captain Tae-hyun of the reconnaissance ship Swift Retribution did not wait for orders. His vessel was closer to Kelton space than any other human ship. Against every protocol in the book, he ordered his crew to jump into the edge of the territory Ji-won had described. They had to see if it was real. What they found was worse than anything Ji-won had described. The first Kelton world they approached was still burning. Cities that must have been beautiful once were now nothing but craters. The oceans had been poisoned, turning a sickly yellow color. As they scanned the surface, they detected movement. Vrakon soldiers were systematically hunting down the last survivors. Tae-hyun watched through his ship's cameras as a group of Kelton civilians, maybe 20 of them, tried to hide in the ruins of what looked like a school. The Vrakon found them anyway. What happened next made several of his crew members vomit. The Vrakon were not just killing, they were enjoying it. "Record everything," Tae-hyun ordered, his voice tight with anger. "Every second of this. Earth needs to see what these monsters are doing." They moved through the system, documenting the horror. Orbital weapons platforms, still firing on cities that no longer existed. Prison ships, packed with Kelton being transported to unknown destinations. Mass graves that stretched for miles. In orbit around the 4th planet, they found something that made Tae-hyun's blood run cold. It was a viewing platform, where Vrakon officers brought their families to watch the destruction below like it was entertainment. The Swift Retribution gathered evidence for 6 hours before Vrakon patrol ships detected them. Tae-hyun ordered a retreat, his ship jumping back to human space just ahead of enemy fire. He transmitted everything they had recorded directly to Admiral Sujin at Earth Defense Command. Admiral Sujin was a woman who had earned her position through 40 years of service. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion, had commanded ships in the Outer System Wars, and had never lost her composure in any crisis. But as she watched the footage from the swift retribution, her hands gripped her desk so hard her knuckles turned white. She called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Council. The council chambers were deep underground in Geneva, a room designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered within 6 hours. Sujin did not waste time with pleasantries. She showed them the recordings. The chamber was silent as they watched. Some representatives looked away. Others wept openly. When the footage ended, Sujin stood before them with the bearing of someone about to make history. "This is genocide," she said simply. "This is evil on a scale we thought had died with our own worst moments. The Kelton people are being systematically exterminated. G1 believes her species is already lost. But our intelligence suggests there are still survivors. Millions of them, scattered across refugee ships and hidden colonies. They have days, maybe weeks, before the Vrakon find them all." A representative from the Asian coalition stood up. "Admiral, with respect, this is not our fight. We have no treaty with the Kelton. We barely know they exist. The Vrakon Empire is massive, spanning dozens of systems. If we intervene, we risk a war that could destroy us." Sujin looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death already. "You are absolutely correct. This could destroy us. The Vrakon might bring their full military power against Earth. We could lose millions of our own people. Our colonies could burn just like the Kelton worlds burned." She paused, letting that sink in. Then she continued, her voice hard as steel. "But if we do nothing, if we let this happen because we are afraid, then what are we? We spent centuries tearing ourselves apart on Earth. We nearly destroyed our own world 3 times over. We finally grew up, finally learned to work together, finally reached the stars. And now we find that the universe has monsters in it. Real monsters. Not the imagined threats we used to fear from each other." Another representative stood. This one from the African Union. "What are you asking us to do, Admiral?" Sujin activated a holographic display. It showed the full military might of Earth. Humanity's entire defensive fleet. 700 warships. From massive dreadnoughts to swift destroyers. Every ship humanity had built in 3 centuries of space travel. "I am asking you to authorize total military mobilization," Sujin said. "I am asking you to let me take our entire fleet into Vrakon space. I am asking you to let me start a war with an empire that has never lost one. I am asking you to risk everything we have built. Everything we are. To save a species we just learned existed." The council chamber erupted in argument. The debate raged for 3 hours. Representatives shouted, pleaded, calculated odds, and strategic disadvantages. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Not because it was the smart choice or the safe choice, but because it was the right choice. As the council dispersed, Sujin stood alone in the empty chamber for a moment. She thought about G1's message. About that desperate plea just to be remembered. The Kelton ambassador had asked for witnesses to her people's extinction. Humanity would give her something better. They would give her a fleet. Within 12 hours, orders went out across every human world and station. Report to your ships. Prepare for war. The message was simple and direct. No speeches about glory or honor. Just 3 words that Admiral Sujin herself had written. "We are coming." The shipyards above Earth had never seen anything like it. Lieutenant Daun stood in the central coordination hub, surrounded by holographic displays showing the movement of 700 warships. Each ship needed fuel, ammunition, supplies, and crew. Each ship had to be positioned correctly for the jump into Vrakon space. She had not slept in 36 hours, and she would not sleep for many more. "How long?" Admiral Sujin's voice came through the communications channel. Da-Un checked her calculations one more time. 72 hours, Admiral. Every ship will be ready in 72 hours. It was the fastest military mobilization in human history. On Mars, the Red Planet's massive foundries worked day and night to produce ammunition. The Jupiter station, built in the orbit of humanity's largest planet, launched fighters and support craft as fast as they could be fueled. And all across human space, soldiers said goodbye to their families and reported for duty. But Earth did something else too. They opened their doors to the survivors. The first Kelton refugee ship arrived on Wednesday evening. Medical Officer Bo Ra was waiting at the landing pad with her team. She had read everything available about Kelton biology, which was not much. When the ship's doors opened and the refugees stumbled out, she understood why G1's message had been so desperate. These people were broken. They moved like ghosts, their large eyes empty and haunted. Many were injured, burns and wounds that had not been properly treated. Children clung to adults, too traumatized even to cry. Bo-Ra had worked in war zones before, had treated refugees from human conflicts. But she had never seen suffering like this. Get them to medical immediately, she ordered her team. Priority goes to the children and the critically injured. Everyone else gets processed as quickly as we can manage. Over the next 2 days, more ships arrived. Tens of thousands of Kelton survivors flooded into Earth's refugee centers. Bo-Ra worked until her hands shook from exhaustion, treating injuries and documenting what had been done to these people. The stories they told were worse than the recordings from the swift retribution. One Kelton woman described watching Vrakon soldiers throw her children off a building while laughing. A man showed Bo-Ra scars from experiments, places where the Vrakon had tested their weapons on living subjects. A teenage girl had not spoken since watching her entire school being bombed. 2,000 children dead in seconds. Through all of this, Bo-Ra kept working. But at night, alone in her quarters, she cried. And she was not the only one. All across Earth, humans were seeing what the Vrakon had done. The footage was everywhere. The news networks played it constantly. People could not look away from the horror. In a small apartment in Seoul, a young man named Rin-ho watched the news with his wife. They had been trying to have children for years, without success. When he saw a young Kelton girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting alone in a refugee center, something in his heart broke open. "We should adopt her," he told his wife. 3 days later, little Velsha came to live with them. She did not speak at first. She would not let them turn off the lights at night. She drew pictures constantly. Always the same thing, her home world burning. But Rin-ho and his wife were patient. Slowly, carefully, they helped her begin to heal. Stories like this played out across Earth. Humans opened their homes to Kelton survivors. They donated money, supplies, time. But most importantly, they got angry. Really angry. The kind of anger that demanded action. In the shadows, other work was happening. Espionage specialist Jae-min had volunteered for the most dangerous mission Earth had ever authorized. He would infiltrate Vrakon space and gather intelligence. His job was to learn everything about the enemy. Their military capabilities, their technology, their weaknesses. Jae-min had undergone surgery to alter his appearance slightly and had taken a ship that looked like a neutral trader's vessel. He docked at a Vrakon space station on the border of their territory, claiming to be from a species called the Rethan, who were known for staying neutral in all conflicts. The Vrakon barely looked at him. They were arrogant, confident in their superiority. Jae-min spent 2 weeks moving through Vrakon space, visiting stations and colonies, recording everything. He learned that the Vrakon saw themselves as the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Every other species was inferior, meant to serve or be eliminated. What terrified him most was what he discovered about their future plans. The Vrakon High Command had already identified their next target. The Shen, a peaceful species of crystalline beings who created art and mathematics, had no military at all. They would be even easier to destroy than the Kelton. After the Shen, The Vrakon planned to move against 6 more species. They called it the Purification Campaign. Jae-min transmitted his findings back to Earth using a quantum communicator hidden in his ship. The message reached Admiral Sujin while she was inspecting the fleet above Mars. She read the intelligence report twice, her face growing harder with each word. "We need to move faster," she told her staff. "The Kelton are not the only ones in danger." Meanwhile, in the Vrakon Imperial Palace, on the capital world, Warlord Krathnek was celebrating. He stood in a massive throne room, decorated with trophies from conquered species. Kelton artwork hung on the walls, stolen from museums before those museums were bombed into rubble. He was hosting a victory feast, with his top commanders eating and drinking while entertainment played on massive screens. The entertainment was footage of Kelton cities being destroyed. The Vrakon officers laughed at the desperate attempts of the Kelton to defend themselves. To them, this was not murder. It was pest control. An intelligence officer approached Krathnek nervously. "My lord, we have reports that the humans are mobilizing their fleet." Krathnek waved a hand dismissively. "The humans? Those primitive apes who barely left their own system a few centuries ago? Let them come. It will be amusing to add their world to our collection." The intelligence officer hesitated. "My lord, they have 700 warships. That is a significant force." Krathnek laughed, and his commanders joined in. "We have conquered 40 systems. We have fleets of thousands. The humans are nothing. If they dare to interfere with our purification campaign, we will teach them the price of arrogance." He did not know that human intelligence agents had infiltrated his network. He did not know that every word he spoke was being recorded and transmitted back to Earth. He did not know that humanity was not coming to negotiate or to make threats. They were coming to end him. Back on Earth, Colonel Young-ho was drilling his Marines. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the best humanity had. Trained in every form of combat, from shipboarding actions to planetary assault, they had the finest equipment human technology could produce. But Young-ho knew that equipment was not enough. He gathered his troops in the main briefing hall and showed them the footage from Kelton space. He did not narrate or explain, he just let them watch. When it was over, the hall was silent. "I will not lie to you," Young-ho said. "Many of you will not come back from this. The Vrakon are experienced warriors. They have conquered dozens of species. They know how to fight." He paused, looking at the faces of his soldiers. Young and old, from every nation on Earth, united in purpose. But they have never fought us. They have never faced an enemy that fights not for glory or conquest, but for justice. They think we are weak because we are young. They think we will negotiate or retreat. They are wrong. The Marines stood at attention, ready. They had seen what the Vrakon did. They had met the survivors. They had looked into the eyes of children who had watched their families die. Every single one of them understood what this war was really about. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Hyun-woo received the final report from Lieutenant Da-eun. All 700 ships were ready. Supplies loaded, crews at stations, weapons armed. The fleet was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. It represented every ship they had, everything they could throw into battle. Admiral Sujin stood at the center of the command deck, looking at the holographic display of her fleet. She thought about Ji-won's message, that desperate plea for someone to remember. She thought about Velsha and the thousands of other children who would never see their homes again. She thought about the Shen and the other species marked for death. "Open a channel to all ships," she ordered. When every captain and commander was listening, Sujin spoke clearly and without emotion. "We are about to jump into enemy territory. We are outnumbered. We are fighting an empire that has never lost a war. Many of us will die. But we do this because it is right. We do this because someone must stand against monsters. We do this because we are human, and we do not let evil go unchallenged." She took a breath and gave the order that would change galactic history. "All ships, jump on my mark. Target, Vrakon, Frontier World, Keshtar. 3, 2, 1, mark." 700 ships disappeared from human space in a flash of light. When they reappeared, the war had begun. The human fleet appeared in Vrakon space like a hammer materializing out of nowhere. 700 warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the frontier world of Keshtar. On the planet below, Vrakon military commanders stared at their sensors in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. Admiral Su-jin stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and opened a communication channel to the planet. Her message was broadcast on every Vrakon frequency, impossible to ignore or block. When her face appeared on screens across Keshtar, she did not smile or threaten. She simply stated facts. I am Admiral Su-jin of the Earth Defense Force. You are currently engaged in the systematic genocide of the Kelton people. Under the laws of civilized warfare and basic morality, you will cease all military operations immediately and surrender. You have 1 hour to respond. The Vrakon military governor of Keshtar was a veteran officer named Thokral. He had served in 20 campaigns and conquered 8 worlds. He looked at the human fleet on his screens and laughed. 700 ships seemed impressive. But the Vrakon garrison at Keshtar had defensive platforms, ground-based weapons, and 300 warships of their own. He had faced larger threats. Thokral sent his response. It was not words. It was weapons fire, aimed directly at the small group of Kelton refugee ships that the humans had brought with them as witnesses. The message was clear. The Vrakon did not negotiate with lesser species. The missiles were 3 seconds from impact when they exploded harmlessly against human point defense fire. Every single missile destroyed before it could reach the refugee ships. The Kelton survivors watched in amazement as the human fleet moved to protect them with perfect precision. Admiral Su-jin's expression did not change. She had expected this. She had hoped the Vrakon would be different, that they would see reason. But she had prepared for the more likely outcome. All ships, she said calmly. Weapons free. Show them what happens when you fire on refugees. Captain Haewon commanded the carrier Righteous Fury. Her ship held 200 fighter craft, each one piloted by some of the best combat flyers humanity had trained. She gave the order, and her fighters launched into space like a swarm of angry hornets. Squadron leader Kyung-soo led the first wave. He was 28 years old and had been flying combat simulators since he was a teenager. But this was his first real battle, his first time facing an enemy that could actually kill him. His hands were steady on the controls as his squadron approached the Vrakon defensive platforms. The platforms opened fire with energy weapons that could melt through standard armor in seconds. But human fighters were not standard. They moved with an agility that shocked the Vrakon gunners. Kyung-soo's fighter twisted through the incoming fire, his AI-assisted targeting system identifying weak points in the platform's structure. He fired a single missile that punched through the platform's shields and detonated inside its reactor core. The platform exploded in a ball of blue fire. Kyung-soo did not celebrate. He was already moving to the next target. His squadron, following his lead. Within 10 minutes, every defensive platform around Keshtar was destroyed or burning. The Vrakon fleet moved to engage, 300 warships against 700 human vessels. On paper, the odds favored the defenders. Vrakon ships were larger, with heavier armor and more powerful main guns. But the Vrakon commanders quickly learned that humans did not fight the way they expected. Human ships did not line up for traditional naval battles. They moved in coordinated groups, using tactics that seemed random, but were actually precisely calculated. Destroyer squadrons would dash in, launch missiles, and retreat before the Vrakon could return fire. Cruisers provided covering fire, while battleships moved into position for devastating broadsides. And all of it was coordinated by AI systems that processed battlefield data faster than any organic brain. Thokral watched his fleet being torn apart and could not understand how it was happening. His ships were superior. His gunners were experienced veterans, but the humans were everywhere at once, striking from unexpected angles, exploiting every weakness in Vrakon formations. A human battleship appeared directly above Thokral's flagship, He had no idea how it had gotten there so quickly. The battleship fired at point-blank range, its railguns punching through shields and armor like they were paper. Thokral's flagship split in half, and he died still wondering how the humans had defeated him so easily. While the space battle raged, Commander Dong-hyun led a different kind of mission. His special operations team of 30 Marines dropped from orbit in stealth pods, landing on Keshtar's surface near one of the labor camps where Kelton prisoners were held. The camp was surrounded by walls and guard towers. Vrakon soldiers patrolled with weapons that could kill with a single shot. Dong-hyun's team moved through the darkness like ghosts. They had trained for this kind of operation countless times, but this was different. This time, real lives depended on them. They reached the perimeter wall and placed explosive charges at key structural points. When the charges detonated, the wall collapsed inward, and Dong-hyun's team moved through the gap. The Vrakon guards barely had time to react before they were cut down by precise fire. Human weapons were not as powerful as Vrakon energy rifles, but they were accurate, and the Marines never missed. Inside the camp, thousands of Kelton prisoners huddled in barracks, starving and terrified. When Dong-hyun's team broke open the doors, the prisoners thought the Vrakon had come to kill them, but Dong-hyun removed his helmet so they could see his face. "We are humans," he said in the Kelton language that his translator implant provided. "We have come to take you home. We have come to take you home." The Keltons stared at him in disbelief. One elderly prisoner stepped forward, tears streaming down his face. "You came for us? You are fighting for us?" Dong-hyun nodded. "Yes, and we will not leave anyone behind." They evacuated 3 camps that night, rescuing over 5,000 Kelton prisoners. When Vrakon reinforcements arrived, they found the camps empty and the prisoners already aboard human transport ships heading to safety. In orbit, the battle was ending. Of the 300 Vrakon warships that had defended Keshtar, only 47 survived. They retreated in disorder, broadcasting emergency messages to Vrakon High Command. The human fleet had suffered losses too. 18 ships destroyed, and another 30 damaged. But they had won, decisively. Admiral Sujin did not celebrate the victory. She stood on her bridge, looking at the casualty reports. 3,000 human crew members dead. 3,000 families who would receive terrible news. But they had saved Keshtar. They had freed the prisoners. They had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. On the Vrakon capital world, Warlord Krathnek received the reports from Keshtar. He read them 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. A frontier world lost. 300 ships destroyed. The humans had not just won. They had crushed the Vrakon defenders completely. For the first time in his long military career, Krathnek felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. These humans were not the primitive species his intelligence had promised. They fought with a skill and ferocity that rivaled the best warriors in the Empire. Worse, they fought with a purpose that the Vrakon could not match. The Vrakon fought for conquest and glory. The humans fought to protect the innocent. Krathnek called an emergency meeting of his war council. His top commanders gathered in the strategic planning room, all of them shaken by the news from Keshtar. "We underestimated them," one admiral admitted. "The humans are far more dangerous than we believed." Krathnek slammed his fist on the table. "Then, we will show them the true power of the Vrakon Empire. Send orders to all reserve fleets. I want every available ship moved to the frontier. The humans think they can challenge us with 700 vessels? We will meet them with 3,000. His commanders scrambled to obey. Orders went out across Vrakon space. Fleets that had been patrolling conquered territories were recalled. Ships that had been in dock for maintenance were rushed back into service. The Vrakon Empire was mobilizing for total war. But Admiral Sujin had anticipated this. She knew that winning one battle would not end the conflict. The Vrakon would come at them with everything they had. She sent a message back to Earth, transmitted through quantum communication, so it would arrive instantly. First engagement successful. Enemy mobilizing reserves. Request authorization to reveal our full force. The response from the United Earth Council came back within the hour. It was simple and direct. Authorized. End this. 3. 1. 1. End. 1. Sujin smiled grimly. The Vrakon thought 700 ships was the full might of Earth. They had no idea that behind the First Fleet, hidden in human space, was the true hammer. 2,000 more warships, built in secret, waiting for this exact moment. She sent new orders to Earth. The hidden fleet jumped immediately, heading for Vrakon space. When they arrived, the Vrakon would face not 700 human ships, but 2,700, and behind those ships would be the full industrial might of humanity, building more vessels as fast as they could. On Keshtar's surface, the liberated Kelton prisoners looked up at the sky where human ships patrolled. They had spent months believing their species was doomed, that no one would come to save them. But the humans had come. The humans had fought for them. And now, those humans were preparing to take the war deep into Vrakon territory. One young Kelton prisoner, a child who had not spoken since his capture, looked up at Commander Dong-hyun and asked a simple question. Will you really stop them? Will you make them pay for what they did to us? Dong-hyun knelt down so he was eye level with the child. He thought about Velsha and the other survivors on Earth. He thought about the billions of Kelton who had died. He thought about the Shen and other species who would die if the Vrakon were not stopped. Yes, he said. We will stop them. We promise you that. The Vrakon Empire had ruled 40 systems for 200 years without losing a single war. That perfect record lasted exactly 3 weeks after the Battle of Keshtar. Fleet Admiral Insu commanded the human offensive from his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Hammer of Justice. His strategy was not to fight fair battles or to seek glory. His goal was simple: destroy the Vrakon's ability to wage war. He studied the Empire's supply lines, their communication networks, their resource colonies. Then, he struck at all of them at once. Human fleets appeared simultaneously in 6 different systems. They did not target the heavily defended core worlds. Instead, they hit the mining colonies that provided raw materials, the fuel depots that kept Vrakan ships running, the shipyards where new vessels were built. Within a week, the Vrakon supply chain was in chaos. Warlord Krathnek watched his empire begin to crumble and could not understand how the humans were doing it. They seemed to know everything about Vrakon operations. They struck at the exact places that would cause maximum damage. His intelligence officers had no explanation for how the humans had such perfect information. They did not know about Jaemin. The spy was still operating deep in Vrakon territory, now joined by a dozen other human intelligence agents. They had infiltrated Vrakon communication networks, bribed officials, and even posed as Vrakon soldiers. Every piece of information they gathered was transmitted instantly to Admiral Insu, who used it to plan his next strike. The siege of Vrak Prime began on a Monday morning. Vrak Prime was the Empire's second capital, a heavily fortified world with orbital defense platforms and a garrison of 500 warships. It was supposed to be impregnable. Admiral Insu looked at the defenses and smiled. They built their defenses to stop a direct assault, he told his staff, so we will not give them one. Instead of attacking, the human fleet surrounded Vrak Prime at a distance. They did not try to breach the defenses. They simply waited, their ships forming a perfect blockade. Nothing could get in or out. No supplies, no reinforcements, no communication with the rest of the Empire. The Vrakan commander on Vrak Prime, a general named Keshmal, raged at the human tactics. They are cowards. They will not face us in honest battle. But Insu did not care about honor or tradition. He cared about winning with minimum casualties. The blockade held for 2 weeks. On Vrak Prime, supplies began to run low. The Vrakon had enough food and fuel for their garrison, but the civilian population started to suffer. Riots broke out as people demanded their government do something. While the siege continued, information warfare specialist Nari was conducting a different kind of attack. She was one of the best hackers humanity had ever produced. From her station aboard a stealth ship, she penetrated Vrakon communication networks and began broadcasting messages across the entire empire. The messages were simple: footage of the liberated labor camps, interviews with Kelton survivors describing what the Vrakon had done to them, images of destroyed worlds and mass graves. Nari made sure every Vrakon citizen saw exactly what their empire had done in their name. The effect was explosive. Most Vrakon civilians had never seen the reality of their government's campaigns. They had been told that the Kelton were eliminated as a threat, that the conquered species were relocated for their own good. Now they saw the truth. They saw children being murdered. They saw cities being bombed for entertainment. They saw the systematic extermination of entire civilizations. Protests erupted on dozens of Vrakon worlds. Citizens demanded explanations. Some demanded their government stop the war immediately. Others called for the prosecution of military leaders responsible for the atrocities. The Vrakon Empire, which had been unified and strong for 2 centuries, began to fracture from within. But the war continued. Krothnek, desperate to turn the tide, ordered his fleets to attempt a devastating counterattack. If he could not defeat the humans in conventional warfare, he would strike at their heart. He ordered the launch of planet-killer weapons aimed directly at Earth. The missiles were the most powerful weapons in the Vrakon arsenal. Each one carried enough explosive power to shatter a world's crust and boil away its atmosphere. 6 missiles launched from deep space, all targeted at Earth. They would arrive in 72 hours. Captain Tae-hyun, now commanding the point defense grid around Earth, received the warning and felt his blood turn to ice. 6 planet killers. If even one got through, billions of people would die. He had 72 hours to accomplish the impossible. Tae-hyun coordinated with every defensive platform and ship in the Sol system. Interceptor missiles were positioned along the path the planet killers would take. Fighter squadrons, armed with special munitions. Every weapon that could possibly stop the missiles was prepared. But everyone knew the odds were against them. Planet killers had multiple stages and could maneuver to avoid interception. They were designed to be unstoppable. The first missile entered the Sol system right on schedule. Tae-hyun's defenses met it with a wall of fire. Interceptor missiles detonated in a carefully planned sequence, each explosion designed to slow the weapon or knock it off course. Fighter pilots made suicide runs, ramming their ships into the missile's guidance systems. The first planet killer was destroyed 8 million kilometers from Earth. The second died 6 million kilometers out. The third made it to 4 million, before a lucky hit from a railgun platform shattered its core. The fourth and fifth fell to coordinated fighter attacks. The sixth missile got through everything. It punched through the defensive grid and entered Earth's atmosphere. Tae-hyun watched it fall and knew there was nothing left that could stop it. In 60 seconds, his world would end. Then, something impossible happened. A single fighter appeared from nowhere, moving faster than anything had ever moved in Earth's atmosphere. The pilot was Kyung-soo, who had left his carrier without orders and pushed his fighter far beyond its design limits. His engines were melting and his life support was failing, but he managed to position his ship directly in the path of the planet killer. He fired every weapon he had left and then rammed his fighter into the missile. The collision triggered the planet killer's warhead prematurely, 400 kilometers above Earth's surface. The explosion was visible from half the planet, a second sun that bloomed in the sky and then faded. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out satellites and disrupted communications. But Earth survived. Kyung-soo did not. His sacrifice saved billions of lives, but it cost him his own. When Captain Tae-hyun made the announcement to the fleet, there was silence. Then, slowly, every human ship in space powered down its weapons for exactly 1 minute in tribute to the pilot who had given everything. Admiral Soo-jin received the news while planning the next phase of the campaign. She stood alone in her quarters for a long moment. thinking about Kyung-soo and all the others who had died in this war. Then she called a meeting with her top commanders. "The Vrakon just tried to exterminate our species," she said. "They fired planet killers at Earth because they are losing, and they are desperate. We cannot let them keep trying. We need to end this war now." General Subin stepped forward. She commanded the Marines and Special Forces, the soldiers who did the hardest and most dangerous work. "We have intelligence on Emperor Thulkor's location. He is not on the capital world. He fled to a hidden fortress 3 systems away." Sujin looked at the tactical display showing the fortress. It was protected by a fleet of 200 warships and sat in the middle of an asteroid field that would make any approach difficult. Taking it would be nearly impossible. "How long would an assault take?" Sujin asked. Subin did not hesitate. "Give me 3 days, and I will bring you the Emperor." The hunt for Thulkor became the most intense military operation of the war. Subin led a task force of 50 ships, including her own assault carrier. They jumped into the system where the fortress was hidden and immediately came under fire. The Vrakon defenders fought with desperation, knowing that if the Emperor fell, the war was over. The battle lasted for 2 days. Human ships moved through the asteroid field, using tactics the Vrakon could not match. They used the asteroids as cover, fired from unexpected angles, and coordinated their attacks with perfect precision. Slowly, methodically, they destroyed the defending fleet. On the 3rd day, Subin led her Marines in a boarding action against the fortress itself. They blasted through the outer hull and fought their way inside in brutal close-quarters combat. The Vrakon guards were elite soldiers, but the human Marines were fighting for more than just victory. They were fighting for Kyung-soo and all the others who had died. They were fighting for the Kelton children who would never see their homes again. Subin found Emperor Thulkor in his command center, surrounded by his last guards. When the fighting ended and the Emperor stood alone, Subin raised her weapon. She could kill him right now. 1 shot and the war would be over. But she lowered her gun and spoke instead. "Emperor Thulkor, I am General Subin of Earth. You are under arrest for crimes against sapient species, for genocide, and for attempted extermination of the human race. You will face trial for what you have done." Thulkor, who had ruled an empire and ordered the deaths of billions, looked at the human general and saw his own death in her eyes. But what shocked him was that she had not pulled the trigger. She was giving him a chance to face justice rather than execution. He fell to his knees, and the words that came from his mouth were words no Vrakon emperor had ever spoken in 2 centuries of conquest. "Please," he whispered. "Mercy." Subin looked down at the emperor and thought about everything the Vrakon had done. She thought about the Kelton worlds burned to ash. She thought about the children torn from their parents. She thought about Kyung-soo dying to save Earth. Then she thought about what it meant to be human, to be better than the monsters, to choose justice over revenge. "You will get a trial," she said. "That is more mercy than you ever showed anyone else." Within hours, news of the Emperor's capture spread across the galaxy. The Vrakon Empire, which had seemed invincible, had fallen. Their emperor was in human custody. Their fleets were shattered. Their supply lines were destroyed. And all of it had happened in less than 2 months. The question now was not whether the war was over. It was what humanity would do with its victory. Emperor Thulkor sat in a cell aboard the human flagship Indomitable. The cell was small but clean, with a bed and basic facilities. It was better treatment than any Kelton prisoner had received in Vrakon camps. Thulkor understood the irony of this, and found no comfort in it. He had ruled 40 systems and commanded fleets that had never known defeat. Now he was a prisoner, waiting to learn his fate. Through the small window in his cell, he could see human warships patrolling the space outside. The Vrakon Empire had fallen in 8 weeks. 8 weeks of devastating losses that had shattered 2 centuries of military dominance. Admiral Sujin stood outside his cell, watching him through the transparent barrier. She had been thinking about this moment since the war began. "What did you do with a defeated empire that had committed genocide. What was justice for the deaths of billions? She opened a communication channel. Emperor Thulkor, you will stand trial for your crimes. But before that happens, I have a question for you. Why did you do it? Why exterminate the Kelton? Thulkor looked up at her with eyes that had once commanded absolute power. Now they just looked tired. Because they were weak. Because we could. That is what strong species do to weak ones. It is the natural order of the universe. Sujin shook her head slowly. No. That is what monsters do. And now, you will face the consequences. The trial was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ambassador One-Sheik, Earth's chief diplomat, had spent weeks organizing it. Representatives from 30 different species came to observe, including the crystalline Shen who had been saved from becoming the Vrakon's next victims. The trial was held on a neutral space station, with judges from multiple species presiding. Emperor Thulkor was charged with genocide, crimes against sapient beings, and attempting to exterminate the human species. The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings from destroyed Kelton worlds, testimony from survivors, documents from Vrakon military archives that detailed the systematic planning of the extermination campaign. The Emperor's defense lawyers, appointed by human authorities because everyone deserved representation, could not dispute the facts. Instead, they argued that Thulkor was following Vrakon cultural tradition and should not be judged by the standards of other species. The prosecution, led by a team of human and Kelton lawyers, destroyed that argument in minutes. Cultural tradition does not excuse genocide, the lead prosecutor stated. If it did, then no species could ever be held accountable for any crime. The Vrakon Empire chose to murder billions of innocent people. They must face justice. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, survivors testified. Every day, evidence was presented. And every day, the galaxy watched. The proceedings were broadcast across hundreds of worlds, showing everyone what the Vrakon had done and how humanity was responding to it. But while the trial proceeded, the harder question waited. What would happen to the Vrakon Empire itself? There were still billions of Vrakon civilians living on dozens of worlds. Most of them had never participated in the military campaigns. They were shopkeepers and farmers, teachers and engineers. They had simply lived their lives while their government committed atrocities in their name. Admiral Sujin called a council meeting aboard her flagship. Present were her top military commanders, Earth diplomats, and crucially, Ambassador G1 and other Kelton representatives. The Kelton had the most right to demand vengeance. Their species had been nearly destroyed. What did they want to happen to the Vrakon? G1 spoke first. She looked different now than she had in that desperate transmission months ago. She had gained weight, and her eyes had lost some of their haunted quality. But the pain was still there, deep and permanent. I want justice, G1 said. I want the people responsible for what happened to my species to face consequences. But I do not want more death. I do not want Vrakon children to suffer the way Kelton children suffered. There was silence around the table. Everyone had expected demands for harsh punishment, maybe even calls to dismantle the Vrakon Empire completely. Instead, G1 was choosing a harder path. My people have a saying, she continued. Breaking a thing is easy. Building it is hard. If we break the Vrakon completely, we create chaos that will lead to more suffering. If we help them build something better, we create hope. Ambassador One-Sheik nodded. Then we must find a middle path. Justice and accountability. But also a chance for redemption. They debated for hours. Military commanders wanted guarantees that the Vrakon could never threaten anyone again. Diplomats worried about creating a power vacuum that could destabilize the entire region of space. Kelton representatives demanded real consequences for the crimes committed against their people. Finally, they reached a decision. It was not perfect, and it would not make everyone happy. But it was just. When the trial concluded, Emperor Thulkor was found guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment, to be served on a human prison colony. His top military commanders received similar sentences. Over 3,000 Vrakon officials were convicted of war crimes and would spend decades in prison. But the empire itself would not be destroyed. Instead, it would be transformed. The verdict, read by Ambassador Wanshik to representatives from across the galaxy, laid out the terms. The Vrakon Empire was officially dissolved. In its place would be a federation of independent Vrakon worlds, each governed by their own elected officials. All military forces would be disbanded. Vrakon worlds would be permitted only defensive fleets, and those would be monitored by an international peacekeeping force. Vrakon civilians would pay reparations to rebuild Kelton civilization. The payment would come in the form of labor and resources, not as punishment but as restoration. Vrakon engineers would help rebuild Kelton cities. Vrakon farmers would help restore poisoned soil. Vrakon teachers would help educate a generation of Kelton children who had lost their schools. Human peacekeepers would occupy Vrakon space for 25 years, one generation. During that time, they would work with Vrakon civilians to build new institutions based on democracy and respect for other species. It would be difficult work, and it would take time. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some humans felt it was too lenient. The Vrakon had tried to destroy Earth itself. Why should they get a second chance? But others understood that breaking the cycle of violence required mercy as well as justice. Engineer Sang Woo was assigned to the reconstruction of the Kelton homeworld. He landed with his team on a planet that had been beautiful once. Now, it was scarred with craters and toxic wastelands. The cities were ruins. The oceans were still polluted. It would take decades to restore this world. His team included humans, Kelton survivors, and Vrakon civilians performing community service as part of the reparations. The first day on the surface, there was tension. The Kelton looked at the Vrakon with understandable fear and anger. The Vrakon were ashamed, many of them learning for the first time the full extent of what their military had done. Sang-woo gathered everyone together in the ruins of what had once been a school. "I know this is hard," he said. "I know there is pain and anger and fear, but we are here to build, not to fight. Every building we restore, every field we clean, every child we help, that is a victory against the darkness. That is how we honor those who were lost." They began to work. Slowly, carefully, humans and Kelton and Vrakon working side by side. It was awkward at first. There were arguments and tears. But gradually, something remarkable happened. They began to see each other not as enemies or victims, but as people. A young Vrakon woman named Hana worked alongside a Kelton man who had lost his entire family. But after weeks of working together, rebuilding a hospital that had been bombed, she finally found the courage to say what she had been thinking. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I am so sorry for what we did to your people." The Kelton man looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Your sorrow does not bring them back, but your work here, helping us rebuild, that means something. That gives me hope." Stories like this played out across a dozen worlds. Reconstruction was slow and painful, but it was happening. Kelton refugees began to return to their homeworlds. Children who had been living in camps on Earth said goodbye to their human families and went to new homes in rebuilt cities. Little Velsha, who had been adopted by Rinho and his wife, faced a difficult choice. She had a chance to return to the Kelton homeworld and live with other members of her species, but Earth had become her home. Rinho and his wife told her they would support whatever decision she made. Velsha thought about it for a long time. Then she asked a question that showed how much she had healed. "Can I have two homes? Can I be Kelton and human at the same time?" Rinho hugged her tight. "Yes. You can be anything you want to be." 5 years after the war ended, Captain Daun, now promoted and commanding her own ship, visited a reconstructed Kelton colony world. She walked through streets that had been rebuilt with mixed architecture, some Kelton designs and some human influences. In a central park, children of 3 different species played together: human children, Kelton children, and even some young Vrakon whose parents had relocated to help with reconstruction efforts. She watched them playing and thought about how the war had started. Ambassador G1's desperate plea, asking only that someone remember the Kelton people existed. Humanity had answered with a fleet, with war, with justice. But more importantly, they had answered with hope. That evening, there was a ceremony at the Memorial of Remembrance. The memorial was a massive structure of crystal and metal, inscribed with the names of every Kelton who had died in the genocide. Billions of names, each one representing a life that had been stolen. Ambassador G1 spoke at the ceremony. She was older now, and the pain would never fully leave her eyes. But she stood straight and strong as she addressed the crowd of humans, Kelton, and even some Vrakon who had come to pay their respects. 5 years ago, I sent a message into the darkness, she said. I asked for someone to witness our destruction, to remember that we had existed. I did not dare hope for more than that. I could not imagine that anyone would come to save us. She paused, looking at the human dignitaries in the crowd. Admiral Su-jin was there, along with many of the commanders and soldiers who had fought in the war. Some of them had scars. All of them had lost friends. But you came, G1 continued, her voice breaking slightly. You came with a fleet. You came with weapons and warriors and determination. You did not come to conquer us, or to use us. You came because it was right. You came because you believe that the strong must protect the weak, that evil must be opposed, that justice matters. She turned to look at the memorial behind her, at the billions of names carved into crystal. We will never forget those we lost. We will carry their memory forever. But we will also never forget that when we were at our darkest moment, humanity became our light. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence. Captain Da-yoon stood, with her head bowed, thinking about Kyung-soo and all the others who had died to make this moment possible. They had paid a terrible price, but they had accomplished something remarkable. They had stopped a genocide. They had brought justice to a galaxy that had known only conquest. As the crowd dispersed, Da-eun noticed a young Vrakon woman placing flowers at the memorial. It was a simple gesture, but it represented something profound. The Vrakon were acknowledging what their empire had done and committing to being better. That night, alone in her quarters, Da-eun recorded a message in her personal log. 5 years ago, we received a plea for mercy from a dying species. We answered with everything we had. We fought a war that cost us thousands of lives. We made hard choices and faced impossible odds. And now, looking at this rebuilt world, at these children playing together, I know we made the right choice. She paused, thinking about the future. The Kelton will rebuild, the Vrakon will learn, and humanity will stand guard, making sure that what happened here never happens again. We came with a fleet. We stayed with hope. That is what it means to be human. In the memorial park, a plaque bore a simple inscription in multiple languages. It was the last line of Admiral Su-jin's speech from 5 years ago. The words that had defined humanity's response to evil. They asked for witnesses. We became their shield. And across the galaxy, in hundreds of systems and thousands of worlds, people of every species looked to humanity not with fear, but with respect. Because when darkness had threatened to consume the innocent, humans had shown what true strength meant. Not the power to destroy, but the courage to protect. Not the ability to conquer, but the wisdom to build peace from the ashes of war. The fleet had come. Justice had been served, and the galaxy was forever changed.